Hey, welcome to the continuing winemaker series here. We're actually, this is the end of the day here at Gambaro Rosso. What an amazing, amazing show, and have a chance to talk to some amazing proprietors, winemakers, and industry experts. And we're going to wrap the day up here with Massimo Alois. See, I was going to say Alois.
Yeah, exactly. It used to be Alois. It's a French family, you know.
So, did your dad speak French? You speak French?
Yeah, un petit peu, oui.
Ah, oui, il faut le faire. Hein? Oui. C'est incroyable. Ouais. Mais c'est un problème avec en émission italienne.
Nous avons,
Alors, so this is a fascinating conversation here with Massimo. We're going to talk about a little history of the family, the fact that he didn't want to finish his law school, or he finished but didn't want to be a lawyer. We're going to talk about this, what I am fascinated with, which is these indigenous brands and wines from Italy that I think separates really some of the wines from the world, from the rest of the world, that the Italians have so many wines. So tell me a little about yourself. You have, you're the fifth, would you say fifth generation?
Yeah.
So what would it be, your great-great-grandfather? Really?
Yeah, it was my great-great-grandfather who cultivated these indigenous varietals in the royal vineyards of the Bourbon Kings. Yeah. So the Bourbon Kings are the Spanish kings who reigned for 2 centuries, you know, the southern Italy.
So they brought these grapes.
Yeah, so what they really wanted to do, they started reviving all the indigenous grapes that the Romans were cultivating in southern Italy. So don't forget that the Bourbon Kings started digging Pompeii. So Pompeii was covered.
Yes, right.
So in the 18th century, they started bringing Pompeii, up.
Right.
So in that period, there's been a kind of revival. So the Bourbon Kings started to look at the Roman classics in a different way. So they started, rediscovering all the Roman literature, the architecture, and even with food and wine. So they started reading Pliny the Elder, who is the very famous historian, Roman historian, that in his big encyclopedia, where he speaks about food, wine, and geography.
Really? Wow.
At chapter 13, he was speaking about the Grand Cru of Rome. Three of these Grand Cru were located in Campania. So he says that the Romans were going from Rome to Pompeii and to Capua, and they used to stop in 3 different areas, Falernum, Caolinum, and Trebulanum, and they used to drink good wine. So the Bourbon Kings, they knew that. They read this big encyclopedia, which is called Naturalis Historia, natural history, and they started reviving all the indigenous varietals that the Romans were growing
fascinating.
In southern Italy.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So they were finding them. You can't just start. They've had to be dormant. They had to be hidden in hills. They had to be. If they're that old, the trunks must be
exactly.
trees.
I mean, they were there, and they started repropagating them. So they were actually buying wine from their subjects, from the people, in southern Italy, from the farmers. But then they decided to plant the indigenous varietals of southern Italy in their own vineyards, because they were related to the French.
Yes.
Maria Carolina was Marie Antoinette's
that's right.
sister, and she was the queen of Naples,
and
Maria
Catherine
Carolina.
Medici.
Yeah, they were related to Leopoldo, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. So these guys, they could not stand the fact that the French were coming with their own barrels down south. So they started planting these varietals in their own vineyards.
That's amazing.
Okay, and Pellagra Lobianco and Pellagra Nero is documented that were among those indigenous varietals that the Bourbon Kings planted in the royal vineyard, with other varietals from southern Italy, from Sicily and Calabria.
So how many, we just had this question of Ashley, but it seems to me that the Italian indigenous varietals, this plethora of Vitis vinifera varietals, outpaces any other European country, let alone, America doesn't have any wine grapes necessarily, but it seems to separate Italy from the rest of Europe of having these wonderful, interesting indigenous grapes. I have a database, and every wine I taste, it goes in there. There's, I don't know, maybe 40, 50,000 wines in the database, besides which I've tasted in my office. And when I start putting in the letters, it'll tell me what all the ones I've tasted. I guarantee you, the Pellegrino is not going to be on there.
Yeah,
No one's ever brought me
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah,
But this is a wonderfully aromatic wine.
Yeah. So this is Pellagra Lobianco, and as you said, in Italy we have thousands of indigenous varietals, and many of these have been acknowledged by the Ministry of Agriculture. And Pellagra Lobianco is one of those grapes which have just been brought back from extinction.
Yeah.
It was almost extinct, and
Phenomenal.
big trees, big vines were found up on the hills. So that's why they survived to the phylloxera. And these professors from the university, which were hired by the ministry, came down south. They found these big trees. They took the cuttings and they repropagated them on the American rootstock. So Pellagra Lobianco is one of those grapes which have just been revived. It was almost extinct, and finally 30 years ago, it came into existence, once again.
So how's a guy who wanted to be a lawyer, become so passionate about this wonderful idea to bring back these vineyards? So you went to law school for a reason. Why?
Yeah, exactly. I went to law school that I actually didn't really love.
Didn't care for it.
Yeah, just because my brother was studying economics, so I decided to study law. But anyway, I never fell in love with this subject.
Yes.
And we got involved in that when my father decided to step back, from the original company. We have the Alois family has always been part of the Bourbon King's court, and they have always looked after. They've always taken care of the Bourbon King's manufacturing plant in southern Italy. So the Bourbon Kings, once again, they were competing with the French all the time, and they wanted to have a factory in which they could produce high quality fabrics for making the garments of the ladies of the court.
Yeah, right, sure.
So my family, it's a French family, came down south, from France in the 16th century, was part of the court, and has always been involved in the silk industry, in the textile. 30 years ago, my father, long story short, he decided to revive all these indigenous varietals that he heard from his grandfather, saying, Michele, you have all these indigenous varietals. No one is doing anything, about these varietals. So someone should do something to revive them, and to bring them back, from extinction. So that's how we got involved again.
So the other thing that fascinates me, and lately we've been seeing a lot of Sardinia wines lately, even the Corsican wines here, and they seem to have their own set of indigenous grapes that they're growing, Monica and some Monica and some other things. So all parts of Italy have their own sort of indigenous things that could be revived, or
It's, I would say that you have indigenous varietals all over Europe. You have in Georgia, you have got a bunch of pretty interesting varietals.
Right, sure.
You have them, all in Eastern Europe, in Germany, but Italy has got a pretty precious treasure, which is made out of thousands of indigenous varietals, and most of them have not received the acknowledgement, by the government yet, because it takes time and it takes money. It's not easy.
So how many are you cultivating right now?
So we're cultivating Pallagrello Bianco, Pallagrello Nero, Casa Vecchia, Falanghine and Aglianico, which are the most widely grown grapes in Campania. Yeah. And then, that's it. That's what we do.
That's great. And how has the American wine public received these? Are they starting to get used to them, or are we still kind of chipping away at it?
Yeah, let me tell you, especially on the two coast, west and east coast, there's interest.
Okay, good. That's great.
Yeah, I think the American people, Americans in general, are pretty curious. They like to travel, and they like history.
Sure.
They like Europe, and I think they love Italy,
Yes.
And
we're supposed to go in June.
Yeah. Okay. So please come visit.
Of course.
And so this is the reason why. And then let me tell you, it's full of Italian restaurants as well here in the States.
Right.
So I think these grapes are very well received here in the States.
I can see this. I can see Italian restaurants, people asking for an interesting white wine, and I have friends who just built their cellars, and I cannot get them to stop drinking Napa Cabernet. That's all they understand. I would love to bring in. I'd love to taste the Rosso later, and have them experience, because I'm going to not only this indigenous grape, but the terroir of that grape.
Yeah.
which is unique to that area.
Yeah, yeah. It takes time, and let me tell you that just a few years ago, a winemaker in Dry Creek in Sonoma decided
Really?
to graft Pellagra Lobianco in his vineyard.
Okay, that's
so
amazing.
in the next few years, we will have a Pellagra Lobianco grown in
Oh,
Sonoma.
wow, that's exciting. That's exciting. Did you visit Sonoma?
Yeah, yeah, of course. And I visited this guy, you know, and tasted his wines.
That's
You know,
amazing.
his first
I'd be fascinated
batches.
to see how the Sonoma terroir changes the grape.
We'll see. We will see.
See, my brother-in-law was in Napa, and he was able to get some graftings from Silver Oak, you know, the famous Cabernet,
yeah,
right?
yeah, okay.
And he plants them here in Southern California, in Glendale, and they didn't come out. I go, what do you think? This is Glendale. You're not.
I can promise you this varietal is coming out, and it's growing pretty well. So we will see. We will
That's
compete
exciting.
in the next, few years with Pellagra Lobianco from Dry Creek in Sonoma.
That's really exciting. That's really going to be a lot of fun. Well, it's a pleasure having you here. I hope to
Thanks a lot.
get out and see you out there. I'm assuming you have guest quarters at the winery.
Yeah,
so
yes,
you
of
people
course, we
to
got
come
room, so we can host you easily, And it's going to be a pleasure, and a big honor if you guys can
questions.
come over.
Well, I want to go to Europe. I got to work on my French, and then we'll come to Italy and we'll tour around and come see you. Anyway, great having you here.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks a lot.
Marmiso, and I appreciate
Grazie.
it.
Grazie
and
molto.
we'll come see you.
Grazie molto.
Grazie. Ah, Bianco.
Grazie.